So thank you. So this is a demonstration of my loss history graph, which I recently updated, and I'll just show you what it looks like so you can see the shape of it, okay? So you can see that it's just a basic piece of paper. It has a horizontal line, and then there's lines of varying lengths going down. That's what yours should look like. Now, you may have less lines on your graph, or you may have about the same number of lines, or you may have more. But what will be the same, you will have a horizontal line. There will be no lines going up, none at all now. And the reason for that is because generally humans tend to minimize our losses. And this also helps our brain and our heart bubble up more of our pain, okay? So thank you very much for listening and being a big heart with ears, 2 ears and no mouth as I share my loss history graph. So I started the graph at my birth year, which is 1960, and I finished it. It actually ends, this is now February that I'm doing this recording, February of 2025, and the graph ends in 2024. So it's fairly recent. So I started very beginning. I started with something called the dawn of conscious memory. And in your Grief Recovery Handbook, that's in the examples that you'll see there. Sometimes they abbreviate it DOCM, Dawn of Conscious Memory. All that means is, what's the first earliest memory you can recall? For me, I can recall 2. I don't know which one is the earliest. One is an image of my pink bedroom that I grew up in when I was really little. I remember the wallpaper, I remember the windows, I remember the furniture. That's it. It's a neutral memory. That's one. I chose here to write the other one, which is, I remember being in my dad's arms on the boat. He was a yacht captain. And once in a while, we were allowed as a family to take the boat out. And so this was a day when I was in my dad's arms. My family was on the boat, cousins, aunts, uncles, my mom, and my dad and I. And it was just a gorgeous day. And I was happy. Everybody was happy. It was beautiful. The sun was shining. We were racing along the river, and it was just great. So it happens to be a happy memory. So your first entry on your loss history graph will be either a happy memory or a neutral memory or a negative memory. It doesn't really matter. But something probably from, age 2, 3 to 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And please don't get bogged down if you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't remember much. I don't remember much from my early childhood. That's okay. No worries. Just start wherever you can start. So now I'll start, and I'm going to tell you something about every line. And what I'm going to try to do is tell you less about the event and the circumstances, and maybe a little more about how emotionally it impacted me. Okay? So first line on my graph, I was 10. My dad fell ill. He was always healthy, so I was surprised. I was a little confused and scared and upset that he came home in the middle of the day and said, I call the hospital, I don't feel well. And then right away, I have a strange thing on my graph. I have a shaded area because for the next 2 years, I did not see him. From that day that he came home from work in the middle of the day, he was put in the hospital, and I was not allowed to see him for 2 years. That, in response to that, I felt really angry. I felt abandoned by him and betrayed by the other adults in the family. I felt shut out and disrespected, and I was super angry for these 2 years. Then 2 years later, he came home. I don't remember anyone preparing me for what was about to happen. He came home to die, basically. Maybe they did, I don't remember. I was absolutely shocked. I mean, the physical shock of seeing him when I expected to see him well, because he's out of the hospital. So I had built up in my mind, we're going back to the way we were, everything's going to be okay now. Instead, my mom and my uncle carried the skeleton out of the car, and the shock, just my legs went out from under me. I fell down. And I'm so sad now when I think about the horrified expression that he saw on his daughter's face after not seeing me for 2 years. And I was just horrified and furious. Oh my gosh, absolutely furious with my family members. That they would, not prepare me, that they kept this from me. Now, I get that they were trying to protect me and do the best they could. I get that. Nevertheless, I was livid and so angry. So he died, and I was just angry. I was super angry. Several years later, I graduated from high school, and that was a sad time because I had a great time my last couple of years in high school. I had a great group of friends. I did well in school. I got awards. It was a high time. And I was really sad because I knew it was ending, and this great group of friends was scattering to the four winds, and I had no idea what was going to happen. So I felt sad. A couple years later, I quit my shiny Ivy League university. And that was very uncharacteristic of me. I was always a good student, so this was unsettling. I was depressed. I couldn't have told you that then, but I was disoriented, I was sad, and it was shameful, and I felt really guilty about having spent so much of my widow mother's money for 2 years at this university and now just quit. A little while after that, I lost my virginity. I felt ashamed. I felt disappointed. I felt hardened, cynical. Several years later, a long-term relationship that I had broke up. This guy's name is Steve. And we were honestly addicted to each other. We had a business together. We lived together for a while, and the relationship went on for 6 years. When we broke up, I was devastated. I was depressed. I laid on the floor for 3 days. I was just lost. Very sad, very disoriented. Several months after that, my mother died. And I was not ready for my mom to die. It was shocking. She got a diagnosis 6 months earlier of cancer. And the reason why that diagnosis is not on here is because I just said, nope, not happening. We're going to fight this. We're going to, you're going to get better. We're going to find alternative treatments, and we kind of acted pretty normal until right about, a few weeks before she died in the hospital. And I was devastated. I was not ready. I felt so lost, so sad, so many regrets, so guilty. I would have said then. I felt guilty about so many things and just really was not ready to lose. This is the longest line on my graph, and I would say it's probably the most life-changing, upsetting loss in my life, I would say. Shortly after that, a few months later, I sold our family home that my father had built for my mom and in which I grew up. Sold my home. I felt like an island after that. I felt a lot of regret and sadness. I became a Christian later that year. And what's sad about that, the sadness there is I was disillusioned. I had a lot of friends at the time that I thought were going to follow me into this wonderful, amazing discovery that I had made. I felt like I found what my heart had always been looking for. Oh my gosh, the answer to so many questions, belonging, purpose, salvation. I mean, it was amazing. And none of my female friends cared to care, basically. Nobody came along. And I was very sad about that. It made me wonder, what kind of friends do I have? I was disappointed in myself, and it made me question even me. Like, what are my values and who do I look for in friends? So it was very confusing, sad time from that perspective, right? About 2 years after that, or maybe even a year after that, I changed my career completely. So for 8 years before this, I had been pouring my whole life into being a traveling singer-songwriter musician, and had, ridiculous dreams and all kinds of, fantasy, a lot of disturbing going on, with that, and super busy all the time. And I changed my career at this time. And so I felt a loss of identity. I felt very insecure. I felt disoriented. I felt unprepared and scared. Then I moved, shortly after that, left my country for the first time and moved to a foreign country where I had to learn a new language. I'd never done that before. Now I'm in my late 20s now. And there's a really long line. I mean, almost as long as my dad dying. I mean, it's a big deal. And I felt like from that move, I lost my friends, I lost my identity, I lost my homeland, I lost the ability to enjoy movies and books and theater and culture, and the ability to joke. My sense of humor went away. Yeah, it was hard. It was very hard. So I felt, just like I lost my identity. So adrift. I had a miscarriage, lost a baby. And that was scary. And I felt like, I felt judged. I felt condemned. I felt like this is a message. What's wrong with me that I'm not supposed to be a mother? So a lot of insecurity connected to that. Then a couple of dogs died, and that was just sad. I felt guilty with both of them. I felt mostly guilty. That's my fault. And was just heartbroken, especially with the first one, absolutely heartbroken. And the second one, I was just completely overwhelmed and just felt so guilty. It was my fault, I would say, more the second one than the first. And just, felt really, really ashamed and guilty that happened, that we lost that dog. Then a few years later, so now I'm in my late 30s, we moved away, almost 40, I guess. Moved away, 41, moved away from Moscow. We had been living in Russia and moved away from Moscow. And this is another really long line because it breaks my heart to its core. We were so happy in our life at that time in Moscow. I had a daughter. She was so happy. She had great friends. She had a wonderful preteen ministry that she was a part of. There were, multi-generational people involved in her life and our lives. We had great friends. We had purpose. Life was good. We felt like we were doing what we were supposed to do, and had learned a lot, overcome a lot of struggles. I was really excited about, I had become fluent now in Russian, and that was, encouraging. And so it was a really good time, and I did not expect to get told to move away. So I was heartbroken, and again, felt very insecure, like, really? This doesn't seem like a good idea to me. And yet, our bosses and our mentors and everybody's, no, this is a really good idea. And I'm feeling like it seems like a really bad idea to me. So what's wrong with me, right? So then now I have another shaded line here. And what happened was we moved away to be with our friends and our mentors, Kip and Elena McKean, we'd been close with them for about 20 years, although at a distance for most of that time. They lived in the States, we lived abroad. But we owed them a lot. Like they were friends and they were mentors. From the moment we landed in LA, we were having issues, problems. And for the first 6 months, we just kept saying, it must be us, it must be us, it must be us. But then after about 6 months, we kind of realized, no, there's something really wrong here. with the family, with the outlook, with the personalities. There's something is really not right. And so we started to talk about, this is not okay, some of the stuff that was going on. And it had to do, we had kids all in the same school, and it started with that, just completely different ways of handling issues with our kids. And the kids were affecting each other too. And we were not on the same page, it seemed like, about anything practical. And we're like, what is going on? And then, it turned into all sorts of other things. But basically, Kip and Elena, this was 2001. We wound up, it was our family, my husband, who confronted Kip and asked him to step down out of his role, and started the whole big, firestorm, if you will, that later became the Henry Crete letter in 2003 in our churches. And so we were at the epicenter a couple of years before, and it was so hard. I mean, basically, we lost our relationship with them a couple of years in, and it was 2 years of just no sleep, constant stress, questioning myself all the time. Am I crazy? Is it me? Am I just absolutely out to lunch? This is not right. This is not right. This is not right. So much stress, so much fear, so much insecurity for 2 years, and stress. So that all calmed down, got resolved eventually, moved on. And after a while, we felt like, okay, the church where we were in LA is okay. Everybody's okay. Our daughter graduated high school. We never felt called to be in the United States. We felt like we're supposed to get back to where God had sent us originally, to the Russian-speaking churches. Well, let's go back. On the way, we stopped in the UK and just were heartbroken over how devastated the situation was in the UK. We wound up moving to the UK. So moved to the UK in 2008, and that was where I discovered grief recovery. When I moved to Birmingham, I felt like I was sad because I just moved again. And now how hard it is for me to move, right? It's like if somebody died when I move. I lose everything. I feel like I'm completely adrift. I'm, disoriented. I lose my identity. I lose my sense of, it's just really hard for me to move. I moved again to the UK, and I felt like everybody around me was grieving. Literally every living, breathing soul that I met, in church or out of church, was grieving. And I had no tools. I felt like I need help and I don't know what to do. So I found grief recovery then, went through it with a friend. It helped. But that was a very hard move. I felt all the things I told you already. Plus I felt really guilty for uprooting my 6-year-old son, who was, when we were in LA, was in a perfect situation. He loved Little League. He was playing baseball, loved it, had great friends, best friends, loved everything in life. I moved into a country where there's no baseball. And, it broke his little heart. And he had a really hard time. I mean, from day one, really hard time. So fast forward, well, actually about the same time, my daughter moves away to university. And we were, I was just sad. It was sad to lose her, and I felt I wasn't ready to lose her out of the family home. I had emotionally missed most of her childhood, and I just was not ready for her to go, and I could not believe I can't get this back now. It's done, and I can't go back and fix anything. It's over. She's out. She's gone. So, yeah, I was shocked. I was not ready. Then comes this whole period of a whole bunch of people dying at the same time. And the only reason why I know the chronology is because I've done this, a few hundred times, but I won't even bother with what happened first. But essentially my husband's father died, who was the spiritual glue in our family. The patriarch, the steady anchor, dies of old age. The best friend we had in the church at the time, who was our best discipler, dies suddenly from really terrible aggressive cancer. A wonderful man whom we loved in the Middle East who was like a son to my husband, Mahir Hin, was killed tragically in a car crash, suddenly, on the way to church. A dog died that was a family member for a long time. My husband's next oldest brother, who's only 18 months older, dies from cancer at this time. And to top it all off, we had a really, really difficult situation in church where a man that I thought was going to be a great friend and an asset and like-minded over a long period of time turned out to just be inconsolably wounded by his other church experiences and just kept attacking us. And it was so sad. I felt helpless. We eventually had to ask him to leave, and it felt like such a failure. It was heartbreaking. It was awful. There was so much pain connected with it. So much, I felt misjudged. I felt really impotent, really helpless, and very sad about the whole thing. Shortly after that, we moved away from the UK, and as usual, I was devastated. I'd been there, for 9 years. I loved our life there by that time, had incredibly good relationships, and we left. So all of the reasons, again, oh my gosh, now I'm going back to America, and I don't know for how long, I don't know what's going to happen. We moved back to support my son as he was transitioning out of the family home into university. So I'm like, so what am I going to do? Who am I going to be? What's going to happen? What happens after that? So disoriented, sad to lose all those great relationships that we had, and, just sort of adrift. Then came a time where we downsized, really heartbreaking exercise to get rid of everything that kind of contained meaning from, they're just objects, right? But there's a relationship behind everything that we had been given in the years that we had lived abroad. We had to get rid of it all, though, with books and, pictures and memorabilia and little things. I just had to go. So very sad to say goodbye to all those things. Then comes a really long line. And this is when I did my grief recovery training. And I'm so grateful for it to become a specialist, because I had a really tough year that year in the States. My son was 19, he moved out, and I could not stop being anxious about everything having to do with him. No matter what I told myself, it's not about him. I could not get it into perspective. I would tell myself, you're blowing things up. It's not about you. And I couldn't change how I felt. I was worried. I was full of anxiety, afraid of all the horrible things that are going to happen to him. And there were some tough things going on around in his life. So I was anxious. I was super anxious. I was afraid. I was worried about myself. What is wrong with me that I can't get a grip? So I did another round of this grief recovery with a specialist and got trained to be a specialist. And guess what? When I did that work, all this calmed way down. And I realized, oh my goodness, it's not about him. It's not about you. There's more work to be done. All of this stuff that had been undealt with was what was weighing on me here. And unfortunately, it really came out. I could never have told you this until I did the work, but that's what I learned from doing that work with him. We moved away from him. This little line here is, my struggle with him. We moved away way too soon. We had to move to Ukraine, bought a place. My daughter lives in Ukraine, so we bought a place near her. And from there, we thought we were going to go back to serve the churches in Russia in some kind of way, any kind of way. We don't care. Not to lead, just be useful somewhere. We know the language. We know we have all these relationships. We have experience. We'll do anything. Put us to work. So we spent a period of about 4 years trying to live in Russia. And the door just kept getting slammed in our face. So that's what all this is. We were in suitcases for 4 years. I never had really a stable place to live, even though we had this apartment in Ukraine. We were rarely there. At the same time, my mother-in-law was seriously struggling with dementia. And the loss of her, she was a force. She was, the loss of her was really sad and hard. She was angry and feisty and difficult to manage. So it was a really hard time watching her die. A friend of mine, Risa, died, and that was just a heartbreak to lose her. There's no one like her. My son got married in this period, and this is the COVID period. My son got married, and the sadness there is insecurity about what's my role now. Who am I to my son? What's our relationship? A lot of fear about what's our relationship going to be like going forward. Then the war in Ukraine began, and this is a significant thing for me because I lost a lot of relationships with my dear friends in Russia when Russia invaded Ukraine. We just don't see things the same way. They believe either Ukraine started the war or, just political differences that are big enough that we can't really talk to each other. So the war has been an incredible divide and really, really sad, really disillusioning. Then my mother-in-law died, and that was a great loss. She was a force. She was, in her right mind, she was really a larger than life encourager. And it was a great loss to have her gone. And then a couple of, lines in here, we went and moved to London, lived in London for a couple of years. That was wonderful. And it was also very challenging to be there and not be in Ukraine, where my kids are under attack all the time. So I felt all the time being in London, I felt questioned. Am I in the right place? Am I supposed to be here? Am I messing up my relationship with my daughter because I'm here? Being in London itself, there was a lot of good. There was also a lot of hard because the church was, a lot of leaders were fighting with each other. Church is a joy, but the leaders were fighting with each other. And then I loved living there. I really do love living in London. It's like, that fits me. I love it. So leaving was really sad for the relationships, which a lot of these people I've known, for 30 years now. And so though we keep up, it's a great loss to no longer be able to be around, watch the kids grow up, share day to day, be involved in each other's lives like we were every single day for 2 years. So that was a huge loss of just sadness, disappointment, and heartache, really, from leaving that. So that was November when we left. So that takes us right up to just a couple of months ago. Thank you so much for listening. You guys were wonderful hearts with ears, and I will accept a hug. So thank you.